Honestly, I wasn't so sure if I really wanted to do this, but I mean, let's face it. I've been thinking about this movie all weekend. I mean, just thinking about it is just how beautiful it was, how terrific it was, how amazing of an experience it was. So I could not resist wanting to do a spoiler-filled review on Gravity. And just to clarify, just so you know, coming from the title and from the description below, and even from my voice right now, this is a full-blown spoiler on the movie Gravity. If you have not seen it, do not watch this video just yet until you have seen it. Unless you just really don't give a rat's butt or whatever. You just don't care, then welcome to my spoiler-filled review on Gravity. Now, here's the thing, okay? So, where do I begin? I don't know. I've never done a spoiler-filled review, okay? So, I'm completely new at this. I don't really like doing spoiler-filled reviews because I don't want people to, I don't want to, like, just have people go to the movie and be like, oh, man, they ruined everything for me and all this, whatever, okay? I want people going with a fresh mind, with giving very little detail as much as I can. Basically, just like other YouTubers, basically. But really, I mean, how can you not resist talking about a movie like this? So, like I said before, don't watch this if you haven't seen the movie yet, unless you just really don't care at all. Now let's get started with a spoiler-filled review. Now, basically, the start of the movie, okay, you got your regular titles, and then you got some reading, and then you get the title Gravity, and then there's this music that's just really building it in, and then it just cuts to silence, and then you just see the Earth just moving so slowly. And it looks so beautiful. You look at it for probably like, what, maybe a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, and it's like just basically like that. Eventually, you start to kind of hear some little background noise, and it almost sounds like someone's phone's going off. It really kind of does. It's like, it's so soft, like you can just barely hear it. And that's one thing too about this movie, was the sound. They know how to use the sound properly, and that's really great with this movie. And literally, as the Earth's kind of spinning, you see this little object, and apparently it turns out to be the space shuttle that they're working on. And it just gets small, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's basically kind of coming in really fast, and then eventually you see it, and then you're definitely on board, and then you start to meet all these characters, and you start to know the story and everything, and that, honestly, wow. And also, basically looking at the Earth, I mean, it just looks so beautiful, like, just basically like the elevation levels on Earth, it looks pretty good. And the fact that it's weather, you add the weather in, like, there's literally, if you look on the screen, and it's like probably to the right side of you, there's literally like a hurricane there. You can see a hurricane. You don't just, it's interesting because you don't just put in the Earth, you don't put in the planets and add a little elevation. They added the weather also, which was actually very interesting, and that's really how you want to see the Earth. You don't want to see it as just the usual, like a globe type thing. It's blue water and there's green. You get to see the Earth as completely legitimate and close to realism as possible, and that was really great. Like I said before, you see the space shuttle come in, you kind of zoom in a little bit, or the thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it gets closer and closer to the screen, and you get there, then you get on board, and then you meet all these characters, and you see them fixing this Hubble telescope, and you get to know about the characters, like George Clooney. He's kind of like this cowboy astronaut, I guess you can say. He's kind of having fun out there. He's kind of just floating around, basically. He's having fun conversations with NASA, they know him, they like him, they get along. And like I said before in my spoiler-free review of Gravity, along with Runner, I said, I did mention that his character, it's kind of like he jokes when he wants to, but yeah, he's serious when he needs to be serious. And then sometimes he really just kind of jokes, just to kind of jokes to be serious at the same time, just to kind of keep Sandra Bullock calm. But we'll kind of get to that in a sec. But anyway, he's basically kind of like the cool astronaut you want to hang out with. Everyone knows him, everyone likes him. He's done this before, and he really loves what he does, and he's really having a lot of fun doing it, and that's really great for him. And then you meet like Sandra Bullock, and she is kind of like an uptight character. It's like she's kind of new at this. She's only being up there just to be able to make her little Hubble telescope type thing. She's new at this. She's not an astronaut. They only just send people up there just so they can build this stuff, and all that. And then also, you also get to kind of meet this Indian dude. You don't really know about him. And at first, I literally thought it was Kunal Nair, who, if you don't know, plays Raj from The Big Bang Theory. I literally was like, is that Raj? It sounded like Raj. Apparently, it's not. It's that same Indian dude from another Sandra Bullock movie, The Proposal, and he was also in the movie The Last Airbender. I don't remember which character, because let's face it, who wants to see that movie again? Not me. But anyway, you see him, and he's having fun. Basically, him and George Clooney are definitely having the most fun, but mostly it is George Clooney. And basically, you know, and it really shows you the beauty of space. That first shot of the movie, which is a very long shot, I think was actually, according to what Mr. Film Jack said, was 13 minutes long. That first shot, coming from the beauty of the earth to after the whole Sandra Bullock spinning out of control thing, which I'll get to in a sec. And he's just, and the way he presents it is just so beautiful to look at. And the framework in that first shot was just so beautifully crafted. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I know cinematographers like Roger Deakins who just know how to get like the perfect angles and perfect shots. And also another one that works with Steven Spielberg, I cannot pronounce his name. You'll probably know who it is. He's basically kind of like that, but definitely more. He's definitely kind of more cinematic than visual. And this one really takes both visual and cinematic experience into his own hands and really makes beautiful cinematography. I don't remember the guy's name. He's done a bunch of great cinematography, though. I think it's like Emmanuel something, and he does it really well. And it really shows the beauty of the earth. It's like, holy crap. I could be in space right now. Literally. You could just be, you could sound like you're being in space. And then, what's interesting is that, you know, they get a call, it's like, there is a report of possible debris, we'll let you know if there's anything else. And then they come back to him a couple minutes later, and it's like, repeat, mission abort. I repeat, mission abort. Full of debris heading in, all this crap. And you can kind of see it, and it looks so amazing in 3D. I'm telling you, man, 3D is where it's at in this movie, okay? It just is. It is, and literally, the debris is coming in everywhere. And what's interesting about this movie, I never really realized until just now, is that in space, there's no sound. And like, if you see in the trailers and the promos and all that, you know, in space, you know, no one can hear you. And it basically tells you that in the beginning little reading section. It's like, in space where there's no sound, no one can hear you. No one can hear you do anything at all. That's really what this movie is. And there's no literally, like, collision. Like, there's no sound of collisions, like explosions or anything like that. Because it's all silent, because you can't hear anything in space other than the voices around you. Like of the George Clooney, you know what I mean. I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyway, you know, then you have this freaking awesome action-looking sequence, and then all of a sudden, and then basically that whole action sequence is what you see from the second trailer of Gravity, from the second trailer basically, to the whole point where the Hubble telescope thing is just destroyed, and then she's on this little latch, and then she detaches, and then she just flies out into space. Literally, from that very first shot of the Earth to Sandra Bullock flying away from that little thing and looking yay big, that was literally the first shot of the movie. And according to Mr. Film Jack, like I said before, they said it was like 13 minutes long. I mean, I was like, man, this is a long first shot. I mean, how long do they want this to go? And honestly, and then at one point I realized I could care less. This movie's freaking awesome. You know, and I'm still invested in this movie. And then you go to another shot. And it's an extremely long shot also. Not as long as the first shot, but still, it's a very long shot. And it's really just Sandra Bullock just kind of floating in space. Eventually you kind of see her side, and then you just kind of follow her as if just you're spinning yourself. And then eventually you get like a first-person view all within the same shot. It's so cool. It really looks interesting. It really is. And then eventually George Clooney gets her, and he ties her up to this thing. Then they go up, then they're trying to get to this Russian little satellite station, where they can get into this little pod and then head to this Chinese station looking thing that will hopefully send them home. And basically, and then the next part, as they're traveling, you know, you kind of learn more about these characters. You know, like George Clooney, he's basically asking about Sandra Bullock's character, Dr. Ryan Stone, and he's like, so do you have is there a Mr. Stone in your family or something like? She's like, no. Do you have a kid? And she says, I used to. And what was probably one thing that was a negative, not of the movie, but with my friends, because I was dumb enough to invite my friends to go see this movie, like, hey, you want to go see this movie? Yeah, sure. But if you remember Jonathan from my Django Unchained review, he thinks everything's funny in this movie. He literally laughs so hard in this one scene, and it's supposed to be a very sad and tragic scene, because Sandra Bullock kind of reveals that she is a broken woman when she's like, I had a daughter. She was like 5 years old or whatever. She was playing tag on the playground, and eventually she tripped and hit her head and died. And he was busting out laughing because he thinks the dumbest, and literally Sandra, like even Sandra admitted in the movie, in the script, she's like, stupidest things, huh? And Jonathan bursted out laughing in that movie. I'm like, oh my god. So really, if you're gonna watch any movie that's like a serious movie, don't invite stupid friends, because they will ruin the movie for you. Well, he only really ruined it in that scene. But anyway, back to my point. You really learned about Sandra Bullock's character, which really, to me, was definitely a big part of the movie, because you can have a cool-looking movie, have cool action, but it's definitely not as good without a great story and a great, interesting character base to go off of, and that really helped the movie also. And plus, that score within that scene was just so beautiful. I've never heard such a beautiful score. Plus, I love music a lot. I love old classical type of music like that. It just sounds so cool and riveting and so beautiful and heartwarming at the same time. It's absolutely magnificently beautiful. And then all of a sudden, they get to there, they try to punch it in, and then eventually they keep swerving and hitting all these obstacles. And then eventually Sandra Bullock gets tied up into these strings or whatever, and she gets caught on her foot. And then she has this other string in her other latch or whatever in her hand, and she's holding it, and George Clooney grabs on, and then he's eventually just kind of like, I'm holding you down, I gotta let you go. Now this is kind of where I get to the part predictable, because you've seen stuff like that. He's like, where the character holds on and then they decide just to let go. But really, it's like predictable, but it's like predictable, but not exactly in the sense where you would think of. And I'll kind of get more into that a little bit later on. And then eventually, because Sandra Bullock's like determined, I'm not leaving without you, okay? And he's like, you're gonna make it. And he's basically kind of just floats, tries to see if he can float over to the Chinese little station to see if he can get in the other pod and go home. And then Sandra's all by herself, but yet as George just floats away. And it's not like he's dying yet, but he's just kind of floating away. And eventually Sandra and him are still having an interesting conversation, and all that. And basically, like, some people can say that the conversation is irrelevant. It's really just kind of George's character trying to make sure that Sandra stays calm, and the fact that he knows that she's going to get out of this, because he knows that she is a strong lady, even though what she's gone through, he knows that she can be the best that she can be and get out of the situation. And they're just having a conversation. He's like, so you're attracted to me, right? I can tell. And he's just kind of joking with her and all that, and he's just like, what kind of first name is Ryan? And she's like, Dad always wanted a boy. And it's really an interesting conversation, It's funny because, like, there's not a whole lot of conversation where it's just like, oh, this is so good, write it down. It's just normal conversation that helped make this movie better, It's like, it just works. There's no other way to put it around. It really works. And then eventually she gets into the satellite thing, and she basically, takes off her suit, and she's just kind of floating there, basically, as far as I can remember. And then eventually she's kind of floating down, and she tries to see if she can still get in contact with George Clooney's character, and apparently she cannot hear him at all. And basically, this is the part of the movie where she actually just starts talking to herself. She's basically all alone in space, all by herself, and she's just basically talking to herself. And really, that's some of the best parts of the movie, is when, you get to see her character develop into what is she's becoming and what she has to overcome. And it's really a great part. But before kind of like this other sad scene happens, she kind of flies in, and then you see this fire going on. And then eventually after this scene, it's kind of like another mood killer caused by it's like the mood killer of a sad scene cut off by something very atrocious and very, like, serious, so to say. I don't know how exactly you would say that as a film critic. I'm only 15, but that's just me. So, and that's kind of predictable at the same time, but nevertheless, it still touches on to the beautiful part of the movie, is basically the heart and soul of Sandra Bullock's character. And then eventually she sees this fire erupt in the satellite, in the station, and then she has to get this fire hose, and she's kind of blowing herself all over the place. She eventually knocks herself out at one point, and then immediately wakes up. I don't know what was going on. It's just going all over the place, basically. And she's spraying the fire extinguisher, and eventually she gets into this escape pod. And she makes it out alive, and the whole rest of the shuttle is basically just completely destroyed. And then as far as I know, she's in there, and then she just kind of reflects on her life. She just kind of reflects, and she deals with the sadness, and she's like trying to get into contact with some people, basically. You know, she doesn't know what to do. She's lost, and eventually it's like, you know, she feels like the old happiness she used to have back then, you know, with her kid. Because she's talking to this one guy, she can't understand him, but then she hears this little girl or whatever, this little kid in the intercom, and she's like, you know, basically commenting, it's like, is that your kid, basically? And she's like really touched by it. It's like she's happy, but yet she cannot control the fact that everything has changed now. She wants to live back in her past, but she can't. And eventually what's also interesting is you can see the teardrops. You can see them come, and then they just kind of float off her cheek. It was so beautiful for that scene. It worked so perfectly for that scene. I honestly didn't expect it coming, because you kind of forget sometimes that about the laws of gravity in space, which you have to remember in order to know, in order to respect the 3D in this movie. But it was just so beautiful. The tear ducts just float off, and then at one point, you know, you kind of see two tear ducts fall, but they're kind of phased out, and then you see this one that just kind of floats in as the scene takes place, and then it just flows away. And it was so sad. And then eventually, she turns off the air pressure things, because eventually she feels like, this is going to be the end of me. There's no way I'm going to make it out. And it's basically, she's killing herself. And I was like, no, don't do that. You're so close. And then eventually, on the outside of the little pod, you see George Clooney's head hanging right there. And honestly, I'm thinking to myself, I thought he was dead. How does he make it out? And then eventually he gets in there, and he opens the thing, I'm like, what are you doing? And then he closes it. Honestly, I don't know where to go, because I'm not that smart with space, but as far as I know, it's a very smart movie for what it takes. And then all of a sudden, it's like George and Sandra have their conversation, and then he finds the vodka that he mentioned earlier in the movie, which I don't think I've mentioned at all in this review. And he's basically kind of telling her, he's just like, and at one point he's just kind of like, you know, what, you giving up on me? He's like, I mean, there's no point. I mean, you lost your kid, you know, you lost everything. What's the point of moving on? And then eventually, the camera fades away to where she sees Sandra's head, and I kind of realize, he really is dead. And then he goes back, and, you know, it is a figment of his imagination, but it works for the scene, because it helps motivates her to just keep staying alive, and keep trying, keep working hard, and try to get back home. And that's really the heart and soul of this movie. Sandra Bullock really brings in the heart and soul of this movie, which is what I love. You see her, like, just become this strict, tied up, kind of tightwad lady, who eventually, you see a sad person inside of her, and then you see a person that is just ready to actually try again, live life again. And that's really interesting. Which helps this finale, because like the ending, the kind of like the final act of the movie is basically the kind of like the giddy on cowboy part that everyone loves to see. And I was really excited for this movie, because the way, like, also with the score, it really helps bring in that tone. Eventually, she launches the pod and goes over to the Chinese place or whatever. She grabs on, she gets into the rocket launcher or whatever, and then eventually, with all this debris, she gets knocked back into Earth's atmosphere, and she starts flying back home, and she's basically just, oh my gosh, she's like, this could be it. There are literally a lot of times in this movie where I felt like she was gonna die. Like, literally, that scene where she's in there reflecting on her life, and the tear ducts are crying, I literally thought that was gonna be the final scene of the movie. I mean, I knew because the movie was short, but I didn't think it was gonna cut off that soon. I'm like, what a sad way to end a movie, but it could have worked. But though you realize the best endings are always the happiest in some cases, and this was definitely one of them. I thought it was perfect the way this movie ended, and it didn't like bring any marks on the movie at all, and it was really good. And then she's flying in at the very end, you know, she thinks she's gonna burn up, and then she lands in the water, and then she's like literally about to drown, and it's another one of those cases, you think she's gonna die. Oh, she's drowning from the thing. She comes up, she takes a quick breath, my bad, can you see my face? Okay, she takes a quick breath, goes back in, then she goes out of the water, and then she's being dragged down, because you realize, oh, that suit's so heavy. Then she has to take it off. I literally thought she was going to die there for a sec. She's taking off her suit, she has to pull it off, and then swims back to the top and makes it. I don't know how she made it, but she did. And then she kind of looks in the sky and sees the rest of the debris kind of flying in. I think she was in like South America or wherever the heck she was. She don't know where she was. Hopefully there'll be room for a sequel. But then she comes up out of the water, she swims to the shore, and literally the last shot of the film, she swims up to the shore, and she's basically like trying to get up, basically. And she's like really struggling because, let's face it, when you get back to Earth, you're not really you're adjusted to being, for weeks, being in space, where you can't really hold yourself up, so to say. That's what gravity's doing for you. And then she gets on her feet and she starts walking away, and that's the end of the movie. And that's literally the last shot of the movie. And honestly, it doesn't sound as good the way I'm saying it, but when you watch the movie, believe me, it's worth it. It is worth your time. It is worth your money. This movie was so fantastic. Go check out Gravity. Now that's my spoiler take on Gravity. Be sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends. And what did you think about spoilers? Should I do some more spoiler-filled reviews? If not, let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends. Hopefully I will see you sometime tomorrow, because I actually do not have school in the morning. So I hope you enjoy this video.